Hello, welcome to another episode of Pierside here on Sparks 1524. I'm Nathaniel Miller. The Rock of Gibraltar is one of the most prominent points of interest in the Mediterranean. About 150 to 200 million years old, it's made up of ancient seabeds that have been compacted together into a titanic monolith. Gibraltar is what's known as an overturned fold. Basically, it's a giant slab of rock that got flipped over on its head by geological forces over millions of years, resulting in the oldest rocks being on top while the youngest are on the bottom. As an ancient piece of an ancient seabed, obviously numerous fossilized remains of animals have been found throughout the rock. Interestingly enough, however, the remains of Neanderthal humans have been found on the rock as well, indicating that this point of land has been colonized by human species for thousands and thousands of years. Gibraltar is connected to the Iberian Peninsula by what's known as a tombolo, which is basically a sandy isthmus. This has made the rock one of the most strategically important points in the Mediterranean for all of human history. Whoever controls the Rock of Gibraltar controls the entrance to the Mediterranean. Gibraltar was known to the ancients as the northern of the two Pillars of Hercules, where mythology states Hercules opened the Mediterranean to the Atlantic Ocean by forcing apart Europe and Africa. The southern pillar's exact identity has been lost to antiquity, unfortunately. Several North African mountains are contenders, but a definitive identity remains elusive. Originally ruled by Spain, the rock was taken by British forces during the War of Spanish Succession in 1704 and formally deeded to Great Britain in 1713. I arrived in Spain to my first command, Fleet Air Reconnaissance Squadron 2, or VQ2, in April of 1998, and I immediately set out getting to know our Morale, Welfare, and Recreation Department on base. MWR provides, among other things, day trips and even overnight trips to various points of interest around wherever the base is, and that goes on here in the States or overseas. My second trip was a day trip down to the Rock of Gibraltar. It was a bus trip from Rota that took a good couple hours, and it was beautiful driving across the southern Spanish countryside of Andalusia. Gibraltar, although physically part of Spain, of the Iberian Peninsula, is controlled by Britain, so we drove up to the border, had to show our passports and everything, and move on through. Much like my first MWR trip to a little town called Ronda in Spain, Gibraltar was a very exciting moment because this is one of those places I'd read about and seen on TV since I was a little boy. And now here I am standing on this rock that, for thousands of years of history in the Mediterranean region, was considered the border to the end of the world. I only had one day in 1998 to visit, so I kind of focused on the British history. But that one day allowed me to see fortifications, structures, and even technology spanning the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries. The line wall was constructed in the early 18th century, incorporating numerous older Spanish structures. However, this wall continually evolved, including new weapons and gates, such as the Ragged Staff Gate, which was cut into the wall in 1736 to facilitate easier access to the waterfront. The governor's house was converted from a former convent in 1728. Today, 200 years later, it's still known as the convent and is the residence of the Gibraltar governor. One of the more notable weapons on display is one of the original superguns, the Armstrong 100-ton gun overlooking Nelson Anchorage. With a barrel nearly 33 feet long and weighing in at about 103 tons, the 100-ton gun was a muzzle-loading behemoth. The gun's range was about 6,600 yards, which is roughly 6,000 meters. This meant the 100-ton gun could put a shell through an enemy ship long before that ship itself was in range for its own guns to fire on the rock. I wouldn't get to see the rock again for about 12 years. The next time I got to visit it, well, sort of visit it, I was aboard USS Ponce LPD-15. We went sailing past the rock as we entered the Mediterranean in September of 2010. It was a gorgeous day. It was the kind of day you dream of being at sea. The air was clear, the sky was blue, the sea looked like sapphire beneath us. There wasn't much wind, so the seas were calm. It was a gorgeous day to be up on deck, watching as we passed this while steam in formation with the USS Kearsarge. Navigating the Strait of Gibraltar can be a tricky endeavor because barely 13 miles of water separate Europe and Africa. The sea lanes are usually kind of crowded with shipping. However, fair weather often lends a festive atmosphere to the transit. Sailors in the Mediterranean basin considered the Strait of Gibraltar to be the edge of the world for centuries. Today, the sense of passing through a somewhat mythical gateway remains and continues to thrill mariners and passengers alike. I was still the new guy aboard Ponce at this point. This transit, however, proved to be one of the three pivotal events that established me with my shipmates as truly being one of them. The other two were, of course, my first 48 hours aboard the ship when we got underway in July, and the third event, the final one, was the upcoming transit of the Suez Canal, but I'll tell you more about that one later. Most of my shipmates were unfamiliar with the scope of work expected of Navy mass communications specialists, so they were surprised to find me spending the whole day with them on the bridge and upper superstructure. My primary job was to document events aboard Ponce for public release, but I had two secondary duties charging in hard on the heels of that one. Creating a historical record of events was critical, both simply by orders of Big Davy for, well, historical purposes, but also in case an adverse incident occurred. Should something unwarranted go down, my imagery would be critical to establishing Ponce's role in the affair. This evidence could be what cleared or potentially convicted the Navy in such an event, so my place on deck was legally necessary and not just nice for public affairs. Besides getting to interact with my new shipmates, because I'd only been on board Ponce for just a little over a month, this transit let me start getting involved with the embarked Marines for the first time. So I started getting to meet them. But it also resulted in me being granted a very rare privilege. The bridge of a warship is a very tightly controlled space for the obvious reason that a multi-thousand-ton warship with lots of things on it that can go boom is being controlled from this space, except for some very senior personnel, both enlisted and officer. Most people who are not actively standing watch on the bridge have to knock and receive permission before they go on the bridge. I'd already received permission to be on the bridge this day because of the transit. I was very careful of my conduct because this is the bridge. Trying to be respectful. One, I'm still the new guy on the ship, so I'm still letting people get used to me, but I also didn't want to be the cause of an incident. Well, apparently I handled myself so well that Captain Crone gave me standing permission to enter and leave the bridge 24/7 anytime I wanted. That's a very rare privilege, especially for someone who never stands watch on the bridge. That privilege I was very careful to treat with respect, and as a result, it was one I actually got to keep through four commanding officers that commanded that ship during the time I was aboard her. My final two transits through the Strait of Gibraltar aboard the aircraft carrier USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, CVN 69. I was actually attached to the Navy Public Affairs Support Element East, or NPACE East. NPACE's mission was to put public affairs officers and specialists on deploying ships. Aircraft carriers and the large deck amphibious assault ships have a media center that's about manned up to 50% when the ship is in port. NPACE puts extra sailors into those media centers to bring them up to full strength when the ship deploys. NPACE also exists to put media personnel on the smaller ships that don't have dedicated media centers or permanently assigned personnel. I was leading the SEOP detachment from NPACE East aboard the Ike. At this point in my career, I'm still a first-class petty officer, but I am the guy in charge. I'm in charge of this debt, and I'm assisting the media center leading petty officer as I was basically her assistant LPO for the entire shebang aboard Ike. When we went through the Strait of Gibraltar in July of 2012, I wasn't even on the deck. I didn't get to see it because I had work down below. One of my sailors, MC2 Aaron Chase, was deployed aboard one of Ike's strike group. Getting those photos from Aaron was quite an experience. I mean, seeing my own ship from another deck wasn't exactly new for me, but until now, whenever I'd seen my own ship from another ship, I'd been the one doing the photography. This was odd, getting photos from someone else. However, I was the detachment leading petty officer, meaning it was my sailors' turn to hit the deck plate shooting the jobs and my turn to mentor them and get their imagery up to the chief. While I was aboard Ike, I did get out and shoot a job at least once a month or so to keep my own technical skills sharp and to keep my credibility up with with my junior sailors so they would believe me when I would give them constructive criticism and feedback. But most of the time, I wasn't there. I did, however, make it a point to be on the flight deck as we transited back on our way home in December. The day was clear, but somewhat cold with a biting wind made all the stronger as the air currents zipped between the headlands of the strait. Due to the need for care when transiting such a narrow strait, Ike was on a no-fly day, meaning the flight deck was open to all. You just had to watch your head because turning around and cracking your cranium on the wing of a parked airplane does rather smart. Not that I did it that day, but I am speaking from previously painful experience. For me, though, there was an odd air of finality seeing Gibraltar sliding across the horizon north of the ship. I was about to transfer to shore duty, and I was already beginning to wonder if I should start considering retirement. I'd gotten pretty banged up over the years, and steel decks aren't the best thing for permanently injured feet and knees. I'm not being dramatic when I say I had a foreboding premonition I'd not see the Rock again while I was on active duty. This premonition was reinforced in 2017 by the retirement of a ship I'd never served aboard, USS Enterprise, CVN 65. In an ironic twist of circumstances, I'd never gotten orders to the Big E despite trying for 20 years. However, every time I deployed, the ship I was on did a formal photo formation with Enterprise. Ike's formal photo shoot with the older carrier was a big deal in 2012 because Enterprise was on her final deployment. 4 months later in December, I'm on the flight deck watching Gibraltar as Ike heads home. I was joking with some of the buddies I'd made during deployment about Enterprise's impending retirement, my own odd history of always sailing in formation with her, and the distinct feeling I had I'd not see Gibraltar again as a Navy sailor. One of the guys remarked that I'd better stop talking about it because either I was psychic and saw the future, or else I'd jinx myself as surely as if I killed an albatross. Well, that is how things worked out. My retirement after Enterprises, I mean, not the albatross thing. There are some things a sailor just does not do, and killing an albatross is top of that list. Anyway, at this point in December of 2012, that was all in the future. Whatever my own odd feelings were, we had a glorious day to sail past the Rock, a day that echoed the magnificent skies and seas Ponce enjoyed the first time I sailed past Gibraltar back in 2010. One of the more rare cloud formations you can see over mountains are called lenticular clouds. These clouds frankly look like giant lenses hovering over the mountains. In fact, lenticular clouds have even been mistaken for flying saucer due to their nearly perfect symmetry and tendency to glow slightly as they catch the sidelight from the sun when it's low in the sky. These incredible formations result from atmospheric moisture condensing as the wind crests the summit or ridge before falling into the trough on the leeward side. The lenticular cloud we saw over Gibraltar this day really seemed like an early Christmas gift as we headed home. I appreciate your time and I appreciate you coming along with me on this voyage to Gibraltar and the waters it guards. To stand on the Rock or to sail past it is to cross a gateway, a threshold to ancient lands of great adventure. If you're ever in southern Spain, Gibraltar itself is worth a visit, and not just for the military history or geological history. The Gibraltar culture is an interesting amalgamation of British, Spanish, and other nationalities who formed a very unique society on that peninsula. If you like this video, please hit that like button. Feel free to share it with anybody you think might be interested. Also, if you enjoy what I do here, hit that subscribe button so you can keep up with me as I produce new episodes. Until we meet here again on Sparks 1524, I hope you have a great week, and remember, go do some great things.
Very easy passage. It's the culmination of the transatlantic voyage for us, and like the transit across, it was a nice, smooth operation. Initially concerned about the weather and the hurricanes that were out in the ocean. However, we found a groove in between the two, and were able to successfully make the transatlantic crossing without any difficulty, and a good training conducted in the process.